title of the talk, it might be a bit of misdirection. We'll see. Might be a trick title to some degree. Talking about how do we get some more standardization in the carbon token space. So to set the scene, carbon tokens are really at the heart of this wonderful ecosystem that is rapidly growing around us. We see with all the amazing talks going on here, there's so much activity in this new space. And I see the carbon token is one of the most important seeds to plant in the ground for all these beautiful flowers, all these ReFi projects and initiatives to grow. So we need to get that initial seed, really nicely ready to bloom into flowers. But we have a challenge, and it's fragmentation, basically. Fragmentation is a risk in many situations. In this context, if we have multiple ways of doing it, then we fragment effort, just work. We fragment liquidity from a sort of financial or economic perspective, and we damage composability and interoperability. But fortunately, in this space, as we know, it's not an issue because we just already have a single token standard which everyone agrees on, and we even have a nice logo representing that single unified standard, right? Oh, maybe not. So we already have quite a few different approaches. Now I have to apologize here for absolutely massacring the beautiful brand colors of Moss and Nori. And I should also apologize to Flow and probably several other projects that I forgot to put on here or didn't squeeze on. But the question is, what do we do about all these different approaches to avoid this fragmentation problem? Well, luckily, there is an expert. His name is Randall Monroe. You might know, some of you might know him. And he's produced some very helpful literature providing advice on this exact topic. So the coders in the room are probably very familiar with this comic. But this is a common pattern, right? So we have lots of standards and everyone is like, oh, it's a mess. We need to, just condense them all into one, and then you just end up adding another standard. So that's great. So how do we add another standard? Any ideas? Shout out some ideas. It's okay, you don't have to. Well, obviously, we create a working group, right? That's how you create standards. Okay, maybe we don't want 15 standards. Let's be sensible for a second. But we have this great working group, and it's one of many working groups actually. And we're, there's in fact, I think is Marcus here. Yeah, there you go. Has proposed, sensible thing of let's try and merge working groups together, so we have larger groups of people all trying to align rather than smaller groups. So this working group, I think, was founded, or at least co-founded by Luke Schubert from Open Forest Protocol. We have members of the working group in the room. And it's quite new. And we're, trying to figure out how to collaborate efficiently together. So I put this sort of initial homepage together, and I took a stab at writing a mission overview, which you don't have to read that. This is just to show you that, there is a working group, there's a homepage. It's currently in a Notion hosted by my team, Toucan Protocol. Oh, I forgot to do the Superbird thing. There you go. I have to get that on camera so that my team is, happy that I'm doing the brand placement. So yeah, I took a stab at kind of describing what's the mission, and welcome suggestions for this. Here's some background. The thing that I want to suggest here, and again, this is my words, hasn't been sort of formally blessed by the working group yet, but it's essentially that, the key goals should be minimize the proliferation of standards around tokenized carbon and maximize interoperability and composability between, well, I've written on-chain carbon projects there, but I think on-chain and off-chain and the combination of the two are really important. So I have some prior experience of working groups, and quite often they're full of talented and highly motivated people, really great people. But even so, sometimes they can look a bit like this, and it can be hard to sort of herd cats in the right direction and come up with useful output. So my thought was, we need a way to coordinate between different groups of people who might see things a bit differently and maybe even speak in slightly different languages, not necessarily human languages, but at least technical languages. And I mean, vocabulary is important even if you're speaking the same language. So that gave me an idea. And I guess some of you, maybe most of you, will know what this is. It's called the Rosetta Stone. It was discovered in, I think, 1799. And it has the same piece of writing carved on the stone in 3 different languages. On the top, you have hieroglyphics. In the middle is Demotic, and the bottom is Greek. And I have a Greek colleague here who can tell me whether that's correct or not. Although you probably can't read it here. And the fact that it's the same piece of writing in different languages, it meant that scholars were able to make sense of the hieroglyphic version by comparing it with the Greek, which they already understood. And then, we kind of built this knowledge through translation between different perspectives on the same underlying meaning. And so my suggestion was to bring this kind of approach to carbon token standards. So I thought, what happens if we build a carbon Rosetta Stone and we look at what are all the attributes that we need to describe carbon, whether it's like an individual token, or it's the project, the carbon project and the carbon vintage that token is representing. So we know that there are many different attributes needed to describe these different things. So with the Rosetta Stone, by looking at all those attributes and looking at who uses which attributes and how they use them, we can see the overlaps between the different initiatives in this space, how different projects use the same attributes, how different projects use different attributes, and then with that knowledge and this kind of focal point for communication, we can work together towards a shared vision. So I put together this database under the auspices of the Carbon Token Standard Working Group. And it's quite simple, really. And by the way, I'm happy to announce, as of right now, it's publicly available. It hasn't been, but this is the link here. So you can hopefully go to it right now, and you should be able to actually see it. And I think I have a timed tweet that should have automatically launched like in the last 3 or 4 minutes on that topic. So I'm excited for people to dive in, and it's just a suggested approach. I don't know for sure if it will work, but I would love people to take a look and contribute, and just see if it works for you. I would love to collect different people's usage of all these attributes, and then we can compare them and contrast them, and we can discuss in a single place what is the best way of expressing all this data. So just to take a quick look, so it's hosted in Notion, probably because this is Web3. Most of you know what Notion is, but it's a sort of great online content management system, and it has some really nice qualities that allow us to do this. Maybe there's other better solutions that we could move to at some point, but it was kind of a quick and not so dirty way of approaching this. So here's an example of a view. You don't need to see the individual details, but the point is, just imagine a giant spreadsheet, and this allows us to take different slices of that spreadsheet and it will just, focus on specific attributes within there. So this particular view is a view of the attributes in the Vera registry and some example values and an explanation of what each attribute is. So you probably can't read it yourself, so I'll give some examples. Struggling to read it myself. So project description, for example, some short text describing how the project is creating impact. Project developer is the entity responsible for the project's outcome and the initial recipient of credits upon issuance. Project location, geographical coordinates of the project. And that's an example with location. Do you represent the location as an address, or just a country, or a region of the world, or some satellite like GPS coordinates, or a link on Google Maps or something else? So all of these kinds of debates of different ways of representing the same data can be discussed in here. So we've recently added the Interwork Alliance carbon reference token and carbon remove it unit token attributes in there. We have, obviously, representing my organization Toucan, we have all the Toucan on-chain attributes. The full database is at the bottom of the page, so you basically see the giant spreadsheet with everything on it. And here's an example. So we're collaborating with Regen Network on bridging credits between the two protocols. And as part of that work, we needed to do this mapping between their representation of data and ours. So we built a table very like this one. And that was part of what gave me the idea for this whole thing. Is like, well, we can, if we put all of the attributes in a giant database, then we can take slices and we can compare two approaches and see what are the differences and what are the commonalities. So that's pretty much it for the Rosetta Stone. Like I said, feel free to take a look yourself, and it would be great for people to contribute. I just wanted to point out that this is kind of like a layer zero social consensus model where, it's about how do we get humans to coordinate effectively, but we also need machines to coordinate effectively, right? So I think in parallel, and these can feed each other, as we agree as humans on the various bits of data that we want to represent in this ecosystem, in parallel, we can construct machine-readable data schemas and do transformations between them and other, comparisons and so on. And, our friends at Filecoin Green have this awesome project, which I see as the kind of the machine version of the Rosetta Stone in a way. And I think there could be a lot of synergies between the two. So just wanted to give them a shout out as well. So the summary, I don't think we need a single standard, but what we really need is well-structured collaboration and clear communication across the whole space. And we want to maximize alignment and minimize fragmentation. And once we have that coordination at the human level, then we need a way to express schemas in a machine-readable form for the machines, and then we can automate the conversion of data between them. And final thought, actually I missed one out because it's in the title of the talk. A baseline for all this stuff, some shared common ground would be great. But maybe we don't need a baseline, or maybe we could have 2 or 3 baselines, but as long as we can kind of compare them and everyone is clear what they are, then maybe that's good enough. And yeah, finally, this, even though it's called a carbon token standard, the working group is called that, and this talks about carbon token specifically. I think all of this applies to off-chain data as well. And that's where the likes of Filecoin Green come in. So that's pretty much it, I think. This is the link to the slides. And with that, do we have any time for questions?
We have time for one question. Going once. Hey.
I appreciate the sort of problematization of the one standard approach. Do you think it would be helpful to eventually develop something like an ERC standard, an EIP, for a formal implementation of these systems that's maybe flexible enough to accommodate the different data representations?
Yeah, that's a Fantastic question. And I think that goes back to my comment about the baseline. You know, that we could have an ERC standard, which is a baseline. And if you look at existing ERC standards, you get something like ERC 20, which is like a baseline standard. And then you get all these extensions on top, which you can add in. And I think, you know, there's an analogy here that we could do the same kind of thing.